2 months to pay back $4 billion. Is Greece going to bring about another Eurozone crisis? Also on today's programme, 3 points from the Premier League title. We're looking at the Leicester City fairy tale and how it all came about. And in Picture This, marching through Mexico City, protesters fight for answers over the fate of 43 missing students. Hello and welcome to the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. The euro is the culmination of half a century of ever closer union in Europe. The single currency is used in 19 countries across the European Union. But since the global financial crisis started around 10 years ago, Europe has had a crisis of confidence. And it's not only about its currency. With Britain holding a referendum in June on leaving the EU, there's a feeling of disillusionment reverberating across the continent. Greece has been the worst affected within the EU, with an almost insurmountable mountain of debt and a position at the front lines of the refugee crisis. Its anti-austerity government is trying to negotiate a new deal with its creditors, but time is running out. The country will reach a hard deadline in July when it must repay almost $4 billion. Today's newsmaker then is Greece, as we ask if it's going to trigger another Eurozone crisis.
For Greece, the last 5 years have been a roller coaster. A crippling financial crisis, multiple elections, and 3 multi-billion euro bailouts. Now Greece is on the front line of a refugee crisis that's seen hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers arrive in Europe by sea. The possibility of excluding Greece from Europe's borderless zone became a talking point, just months after Greece narrowly avoided bankruptcy and an exit from the single currency in July. Greece's economic storm has since calmed thanks to emergency loans from the Eurozone. But new debt payments lie ahead, and bailout talks have once again run into difficulty, raising concern that we may be seeing the return of the Greek crisis. Greece is on an €86 billion lifeline, but the government has had to implement controversial reforms in exchange. It's meant zero growth for the Greek economy in the last year, and experts forecast it could shrink a further 1% this year. Athens is back under the microscope as international lenders discuss whether to unlock more money. Greece needs to present €3.6 billion of austerity measures, but Athens doesn't want to cut pensions or raise income tax any further. But Greece badly needs the money to meet a June repayment deadline or default on its debts. With Greece caught up in a cycle of debt and austerity, critics say Eurozone lenders are once again kicking the can down the road. With anxieties over Greece re-emerging, skeptics question whether nervousness over the future of the single currency will ever end. The refugee crisis is threatening the EU's borderless Schengen zone and testing the will of its members to share financial and human costs. Next month, Britain will decide whether it wants to remain in the club. Greece, too, is teetering on the edge, overwhelmed by multiple crises. And it can only take so much. Sandra Gatman, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss whether Greece is pushing the Eurozone to breaking point is Vicky Pryce. She's a chief advisor at the Centre for Economics and Business Research in London. And in Brussels is Daniel Gros. He's director of the Centre for European Policy Studies. Thanks both of you for joining us. Vicky Pryce, let me start with you. Is the Euro crisis the sequel about to unfold?
Well, let's hope not. But of course, we've known that Greece has been in crisis for quite some time. There is no way that the economy can start growing again unless something fundamental is done to its debt. Greece has been struggling for ages with an increasing mountain of debt. And the real problem that it's facing right now is that the creditors themselves cannot agree on what the best course of action is. The International Monetary Fund wants something done to that debt, thinks that anything that the Greeks are putting forward right now, which the Europeans seem to think perhaps might work, actually are not going to help at all in terms of ensuring that Greeks are able to have a sustainable growth in the future. So therefore it's not actually willing to participate in this bailout for the moment. And the Europeans, of course, want the IMF in, want the International Monetary Fund to be involved because it gives more credibility to the whole process. And if they can't get a deal between the two of them, I think it's going to be actually quite hard also for Greece itself to move along a path that actually might make a difference in terms of where it might end up in the future. Mm-hmm. It's a really, really crucial point, not just the amount of money they have to pay back, but also whether anything that's being done right now is sustainable.
Daniel Gros, do you share those views that the situation is quite precarious and unsustainable?
Greece is certainly in a very difficult situation. I think the entire discussion misses a central point, or two central points. First of all, Greece is not the euro area. We might have a Greek crisis, but we don't have a euro area crisis anymore. And the second point is that the discussion in Greece about the debt is really about something which doesn't concern Greece at all for the next 10 years. Because for the next 10 years, they won't have to pay anything on their debt. The discussion shouldn't be on fiscal adjustment, should be how to get the Greek economy growing. That means export growing. This is the key problem for Greece, not so much how much debt they owe, on which they anyway don't pay any interest, in which they might repay or not in 30 years. Nobody cares about that at this point.
Daniel, do you sincerely believe that the crisis in Greece, if it gets worse, can be contained and there'll be no contagion or no domino effect whatsoever?
No, of course, will not be zero domino effect, but the domino effect will be quite limited and can certainly be contained, because the other countries have seen what it means to be Greece, what it means not to adjust the fiscal budget, not to do structural reforms. And nobody really wants to be in that situation. And therefore, most of the other countries have done reforms. They might not be sufficient, might not be perfect, but they have done reforms. They are growing. They can finance themselves in the market at a reasonable risk premium. And markets understand that. And therefore, I'm quite sure that even if Greece were to go down the drain, so to speak, the rest of the euro area would have a small cost. There might be some disturbances, but it can be done.
Vicky, Pryce, the contagion can be contained.
Well, I have to say that I disagree profoundly with that. I mean, first of all, I think it's worth bearing in mind that many countries in Europe are in similar conditions. They may not have as high a debt right now, but actually they have a hugely unsustainable debt as well. Even the countries like Ireland, which are growing quite fast, Ireland has a debt-to-GDP ratio of around 120%. Portugal, which is now in a serious situation because it's actually not growing anything like as fast and containing its deficit as it should be, has a debt-to-GDP ratio of 130%. We've seen Italy with a debt-to-GDP ratio of 137%. None of these countries, with the exception of Ireland recently, has been growing to the extent that perhaps can make us feel reasonably content that there will be easing out the problems that they have in the future. And what is more, the only reason why they've been able to borrow at low rates is because they're part of quantitative easing. So the central bank has been pumping in money like there's no tomorrow, and not only in terms of buying up bonds, of course, in those markets, government bonds, and therefore allowing yields to come down so those countries can borrow more cheaply, of course, in the future, but also by providing huge amounts of liquidity to the banking system in Europe, which in itself is suffering from a very substantial increase in non-performing loans. So look at the problems of the Italian banks just now, when a new fund has had to be established in order to make sure that those banks can survive. So we're talking about problems which haven't gone away. Greece is not just an outlier, an oddity in the whole of the Eurozone. It is actually a manifestation of what has been wrong with the euro all along.
Daniel, Ireland, Portugal, Italy, Spain, do none of those worry you?
All of them worry me. Of course, we are not worry-free, but all of the other countries which had an adjustment program are out of it now. All of them have their deficit under control. All of them are growing. Some are more quickly, some more slowly. Greece is the only one which still cannot stand on its own feet. And then the key difference between Greece, let's say, and Ireland is very simple. And that is, I think, key for the economic analysis. Greece owes most of its debt to foreigners. Ireland and Italy They have also mountains of debt, but that debt is owed to 90–80% to their own people. So if interest rates go up, the Italian government has to pay more, but it pays to its own citizens. They spend more in Italy, and it comes back. And if ever there's a need to adjust the debt of the government of Italy, of Ireland, it can be done without too much trouble, because this is debt owed by the government to its own citizens. So it's basically a question whether citizens want to get their money back from the government or pay more taxes. So that is the reason why the rest of the Eurozone is pretty stable. Everybody can finance himself or herself mostly without recourse to foreign financing, and Greece is the only outlier.
I finally want to touch on the UK. Vicky, I know the UK is not part of the Eurozone, but it is a part of the EU for now. If British voters vote yes to a Brexit, what will it do to the Eurozone? Do you think it will have some sort of impact?
I think it will. I mean, first of all, it will begin to show that the EU can indeed break up. And that, of course, may lead to all sorts of other countries wondering what they might want to do. Do they want to stay or do they want to go? And, of course, how the Brits manage to do any renegotiation in terms of the links that they will have with the rest of Europe will matter hugely. But I think there are some people who think that perhaps what will happen is that the Eurozone might just get more closely integrated as a result, to just be stronger, given that they will have lost a big member, if you like, from Europe. Maybe the Eurozone will be the really strong area, and therefore they'll try and see how they can unite even more, possibly. But I personally think that the politics are such, and the differences that exist are so great right now, that the idea of a stronger political union right now, with all the migration crisis we're seeing, is unlikely to happen. But the other possibility, of course, is that we might move to a situation where just a few countries stay in the euro and others sort of depart simply because it becomes unsustainable. And they can look at different ways in which they can be attached to the Euro group and the Eurozone and also the rest of Europe, if you like, perhaps like the UK has done it itself. So I think it's going to be very uncertain. I think it is going to cause an awful lot of concern to businesses, to policymakers, and we've already seen the International Monetary Fund, the Americans, everyone saying that if Britain were to leave, it will be a destabilizing force for the continent as a whole, and I think for the euro area too.
Okay, just about enough time for a final thought from Daniel. Destabilizing if the UK breaks away, Daniel, what do you think?
Yeah, there might be a few weeks of troubles, but I think politicians will shift immediately into damage limitation mode. They will tell everybody, okay, even if you're out, we want to have friendly relations, very deep relations, and therefore I think the uncertainty is unavoidable, but it can be contained, and in the end, the continent will go on whichever way the UK chooses to go.
Vicky, Pryce and Daniel Gros, thank you very much for joining us. Still to come on the Newsmakers, how Leicester City beat the odds to lead the Premier League. And in Picture This, the calls for answers get louder over the disappearance of 43 students in Mexico. This time last year, Leicester City were hovering around the bottom of the Premier League table, tipped by most experts to be relegated. After a miraculous escape, those same experts predicted relegation again for them this season. But instead, with 3 games and 9 points left to play for, the Foxes find themselves a win away from their first ever Premier League title. The Newsmakers' Duncan Crawford reports.
They're the newest and unlikeliest of footballing superstars. 2 years ago, Leicester City weren't even in the Premier League. Now they are top of the table with 3 games to go. How has a team that were almost relegated last season done it? From not winning for 13 games in a row to beating almost everyone they face. They've already achieved more than they could possibly imagine.
We are in Champions League. We are in Champions League, man.
That was my next
Dilly din, dilly dong, come on.
I seen a stat yesterday. I think they've only lost something like 4 or 5 games in 44 games, which is unbelievable.
Do you know what I did at the beginning of this season? Put 100 quid on Leicester, so I think I'll do okay.
No, you didn't.
I think maybe I did, maybe I didn't.
The team are already being lavished with praise and awards. and are now close to making the biggest upset in sports history. The celebrations have already started in Leicester. And this team of underdogs from the English Midlands are gaining fans around the world. The club is owned by a Thai businessman, and in Bangkok, Leicester City shirts are the new major fashion craze.
I don't care if we win or not, but it's something that's special today that we have 600 people come to celebrate and enjoy, to watch Leicester.
To put what Leicester are doing into some perspective, at the start of the season, you could get odds of 500 to 1 for Barack Obama to admit the moon landing was faked, 1,000 to 1 for the Duke and Duchess of Cambridge to have triplets, and 2,000 to 1 for Elvis Presley to be found alive. All those bets were deemed more likely than Leicester winning the Premier League at a massive long shot of 5,000 to 1. Former England captain, now TV presenter Gary Lineker even promised to present in his pants if the team win, something Leicester City fans won't let him forget.
I want Leicester to win it. What they're doing is remarkable, and it could be history for sure, the way they did it, how they did it.
When I was at Leicester, it was occasionally winning cups, but to actually go out there and win the league is going to be phenomenal, not just for the club itself, but for the whole city.
From the bottom of the league to the top in just 12 months, Leicester City have proved the doubters wrong, and the common assumption that more cash off the field defines success on it.
And now we go straight away to try to win the title. Yes, yes, man.
We've asked you also.
Only this remain, only this.
Duncan Crawford, The Newsmakers.
Well, joining me now to discuss Leicester's turning of the table is football writer and poet Musa Okwonga in Berlin. Musa, great of you to join us. One stat that Duncan didn't mention in his report there for that added perspective. Leicester at 5,000 to 1 to win the league. Kim Kardashian to become US president was at 2,000 to 1. This is absolutely insane. I mean, what a fairy tale. Everybody's asking the question, how? Was it because Claudio Ranieri is just this incredible genius of a tinkerman and it's his system? Is it his players? Is it just luck and momentum? What is it, Musa?
Well, it's anything but luck. I think there's several factors here. The first is that Ranieri actually, contrary to his nickname of Tinkerman, has actually kept a fairly settled squad and a settled team. So the team spirit's terrific. I think as well, this is also a team and a squad which has had so many near misses. If you look at so many of these leading players like N'Golo Kante, players like Jamie Vardy, these are footballers who, until very recently, clubs didn't really want. So they were players who've been given up on. And the great thing is actually, having been so underrated for so long, both Ranieri and the players, is created this incredible team spirit, which now has given us momentum that you're talking about. And they may well pull it off on Saturday against Manchester United. It's a phenomenal achievement.
I hope they don't do it against Manchester United. Well, I hope they do it, but Spurs lose, because I'm a Man United fan. So I want United to finish in the top 4. So I want United to win. But hopefully Spurs lose against Chelsea so that I don't spoil the Leicester story and everybody wins. I want to ask you, Musa, can this happen in any other league? I mean, you have Spain, right? You have Real Madrid and Barcelona, Atletico Madrid sort of, at their heels. You have Germany with Bayern Munich and maybe Dortmund now and then wins the championship. But can this happen anywhere else besides the Premier League?
Yes, it can. Absolutely, it can. And if you look at Atletico, what they've achieved is absolutely astonishing. Let's not forget, Atletico won the league double in 1995-96, but there was a long period around that time they weren't doing very much in the league. And this is really a great triumph for Leicester in the sense that it encourages other clubs who've got fewer resources, who need to make smarter investments, really great scouting. I mean, you look at Atletico, for example, and Leicester, the one those two clubs have in common is they have exceptional scouting teams. And if you've got great scouting, you buy players at the right level, the right age, you can actually save, tens of millions of pounds. And that, I think, is the lesson to be drawn from all of this. Yeah,
you mentioned money. This industry is worth billions of dollars. Ahead of Leicester, you have these massive clubs that are global brands with far deeper pockets than Leicester City. is there an argument that perhaps they'll upset the apple cart temporarily, but power systems and powerful clubs don't just roll over and die? Maybe next season we'll see the status quo come back, and then we'll go back to a more sort of traditional top four. Man United, Man City, Arsenal, Chelsea, and the likes of Leicester will maybe fall away. What do you think?
I would say actually not so fast, simply because the fact that Leicester are now achieving so well means they can have a higher calibre of player coming to them. So let's not forget that. Let's also not forget that Leicester's turnover was higher this year than Marseille or Roma. So actually Leicester, in a sense, financially, in terms of Europe, they're a big club. And being a big enough club, I mean, obviously with the TV money deal coming in next year, they'll be a much more attractive option to players outside Europe who may not have looked at them before. So I think Leicester actually might be here for a while longer than we all think.
The other team that's overshadowed by Leicester's success right now, Tottenham, they're second at the moment, 7 points behind.
Yes.
Leicester City, I guess, is a miracle. Tottenham's a sort of minor miracle right now, being second and still having a chance to win the league. What's been the secret to their success? And are there similarities with Leicester City? Outstanding
coaching by Pochettino, backing a vision by, they've got a director of football, which is key. They've got a superb academy, great recruitment, and they trust the manager. Daniel Levy has been someone who's really invested in the infrastructure. They've got the new stadium coming as well. I actually think that Tottenham Hotspur will be they're my favourites for next year, simply because they have a terrific squad, wonderful coach, and a really strong, I suppose, a spine of a team. And, it's the cliched phrase that Van Gaal has used at Manchester United. It's the philosophy. They've got a very clear plan of what they want to do. And if you look at Leicester and Tottenham this year, the two clubs with the clearest philosophy and strategy are the ones who are doing the best.
Yeah, now besides Tottenham, who have a mathematical chance, still have a mathematical chance of winning it, you have everybody besides Tottenham fans supporting Leicester City. There's a certain lovability about the club, about this fairy tale story, about Ranieri just being a really cuddly, lovely character. How much of it is PR and how much of it is just down to the fact that they are just damn lovable?
Well, I think it's funny. Ranieri gets caricatured as lovely and fun, and he is a lovely guy, but he's also got that hard side as well. But I think beyond that, they are a lovable team. If you look at the stories they've got, N'Golo Kante was playing in the 3rd division in France just a couple of years ago. Riyad Mahrez made his debut for Algeria, I think just 2 years ago. Jamie Vardy's had his scrapes off the field, we know that, but his story is a remarkable, inspirational one. These are all players who've had a last chance saloon. They're all in the last chance saloon. A lot of them had given up a chance of winning anything. So that's an incredible story. And Leicester itself as a town, it's a lovely town. It's very diverse. It's a model of integration. I think 300,000 inhabitants. It's a really lovely town. So I hope they go ahead and do it, because they certainly deserve to.
Are you hoping they do it at Old Trafford?
I'm a United fan, so I'm hoping they don't, but who knows what the football gods have in store.
All right, Musa, it's been great talking to you. Thank you very much. Well, to hear the inside story on Leicester City's rise, watch our sports show Beyond the Game on Friday at 17:30 GMT. They have an exclusive interview with Leicester City manager Claudio Ranieri ahead of Sunday's title decider with Manchester United. In today's Picture This, hundreds of people have been protesting in Mexico City. They want answers after an independent inquiry failed to find out how 43 students went missing almost 2 years ago. Let's take a look.
El día que quiera cerrar el caso este gobierno mexicano, primero tendrá que matarme, porque no regresaré a casa.
Estamos hablando posible fabricación de evidencias, estamos hablando de posible tortura para generar una teoría del caso.
Hoy no nomás son 43 desaparecidos, son miles y miles de desaparecidos, miles de crímenes cometidos sin investigarse.
Today's newsmaker has been Greece, as we asked whether it could bring about another Eurozone crisis. A deadline to repay $4 billion is approaching fast, and what Greece wants is radical restructuring of its debt so its economy can grow and it can afford its repayments. But its creditors are demanding deep reforms to ensure the mistakes of the last decade are never repeated again. The two positions are almost irreconcilable. But that's exactly where the Greek government has found itself for the past 6 years. Even the threat of another Greek default on its loans would shake Europe's currency markets and send shares tumbling once more. And the effects politically could be even greater. You've been watching this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. As always, thanks for watching. See you soon. Bye-bye.